Hi again. This isn't exactly dye related. However, I decided to make some drawstring bags to use for storage for items I've foraged for natural dye making. For example, these are alder cones that I'm going to put in this bag when it's finished. This bag is made of a cotton muslin fabric, but you can use whatever kind of fabric you like, even organza for something more decorative. This fabric doesn't have a right or wrong side, but you can use a print as well. I cut my cloth on a cutting mat using a rotary cutter, and you can cut it to any size you like. You just need to remember to add a 5/8 inch seam allowance on both sides. I made the bottom on the fold, and you'll need to allow 1.5 inches extra on the height to allow for the drawstring casing. If you're using a fabric with a right and a wrong side, you need to place the wrong sides together for this step. So the right sides are facing out. This is different than the typical method of placing right sides together. Because this is not a lined bag, I make a sort of a French seam so that there are no raw edges on the inside. You can see here how I've encased the raw edges inside a sort of a French seam. To start off, like I said, with wrong sides together, measure from the top 2 inches down and put a mark. And put another mark at 2.5 inches. We're going to leave a gap in the seam here. I also mark this with a pin so I don't forget while I'm sewing. Pin the side and then do the same on the opposite side. Sew a 1/4 inch seam starting at the top and stopping at the first mark and anchoring there. Then lift the fabric and move the foot to the second mark and continue the seam to the bottom. Do the same for the seam on the other side. Now that both sides are stitched with the 1/4 inch seam, we'll trim the seam to approximately 1/8 of an inch. So in other words, trim off about half of the seam allowance. Now I'm ironing the seams to one side on both sides. I iron each side in the opposite way. And then turn the bag inside out and use a pointy object to poke the corners out square. Give the seams an extra press and then remark the channel at 2 and 2.5 inches on both sides. And we're back at the sewing machine. This time we'll sew a 3/8 inch seam. Again, we'll leave a space between the marks at 2 and 2.5 inches from the top. We'll do the same thing for both sides. At the ironing board again, we'll iron the seam to one side. I like to make each seam lie in the opposite direction. Now on the top, we'll fold it over roughly 1/4 of an inch and iron it, just roughly. It doesn't have to be exact. Now take that top folded over edge and fold it over again. So it measures around 1.25 inches. Pin it in place all the way around. Now we'll sew the casing in place. I sew about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and then I go around a second time right at the edge. This part is the most difficult part of the entire project. It's easy at the top, but it gets tough as you get near the bottom. Starting below the casing, we will sew along the free edge of the side seam. Here I am approaching the bottom, and you need to make sure not to sew anything except what you're supposed to be sewing. So it's a real slow going, tricky little thing to get right down to the very bottom edge. Just go a little bit at a time. Stop frequently to make sure you're not gonna have to tear out what you got going there. Okay, now we get to turn it right side out. And just use something to push the corners out again to make them square. I just use the end of the scissors, but there is a tool for doing this that's not as sharp. All right, this is the completed bag. We just need to put the handles in. So I am choosing to use this for the handles. It's got, you know, the little bit of a rustic look, as well as it's something that I had around. So just get a safety pin and put it through the end of whatever you're using, and then find one of the holes and just feed it through. We're gonna pull it through. And when you get to the other side, just keep going. Don't pull it out the first seam there. You're gonna put it in the one side and go all the way around and pull it out the same spot that it went in. There we go. I've pulled it all the way through. I'm just going to cut the cord. There we go. Take the pin out and tie this in a knot so that it doesn't fray or get pulled back through the bag. Now, the next thing is to do exactly the same, but starting in the opposite side, and go in and all the way around, and you'll have the same thing coming out of both sides. There we go. And I was going to put a little cardboard tag on there to label the contents, but I found that I had these little chalkboard things in my stash, so I've just got a few of them. I'll use those up, and then I'll start using cardboard. I don't actually have any chalk though to fill these out, so I guess the dollar store next time I will pick up some chalk. I could use it for some dyeing projects anyway. Add chalk to the dye bath. All right, there it is, all complete, and poof. And you can pull it tight, and you could use these to wrap around here if you needed to make it extra secure at the top. You know, if it was, maybe you have some wool in there that you don't want moths to get in. So there we go. Finito.